All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for your patience while we allowed people to join us. My name is Todd Markey Booten. I'm the Senior Director of Accessibility here at Strive, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Accessibility Beyond Compliance. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping notes. Today, captions will be provided by Captions Unlimited. So if you'll be watching our words, please feel free to use that option. We'll be having two very brief polls at the start and end of the webinar. We strongly encourage people to take 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, to provide their responses to those polls. We'll use your responses in a discussion later in the webinar. We also encourage you to use the Q&A function in Zoom to submit questions throughout the webinar. Once again, the Q&A function rather than chat. We will be monitoring your questions, and we'll include at least, consider at least one question at the end of each section, and we'll save the remainder for the formal Q&A session at the end of the webinar. I just want to reassure people that we will respond to every question. If we don't get to your question during the webinar, we'll respond via email after. If you're like me, I always come up with my best questions when the webinar is done. And I really believe that the most effective webinars are those that are the start of a dialogue. And we would really like to continue this dialogue with you once we've closed the Zoom presentation. Finally, we will be providing materials for the webinar when we're done. We'll be distributing a video with captions, a descriptive transcript, and an accessible PowerPoint presentation, which we'll use during the webinar for your future use. Please watch for email notifications for when those materials are available. So what will we be discussing today? First, we'll start by meeting our speakers. We're joined by two great speakers today. Then we will, while we're doing that, we'll also offer the first poll to you, which allows you a chance to tell us about your experiences with accessibility. We'll then move on to discussing what does compliance mean in the context of accessibility? And based on that definition, what does going beyond compliance mean? We'll consider a few examples of the intersection between accessibility and user experience and also how they differ. And finally, we'll consider how can we create digital products that are accessible, usable, and enjoyable by focusing on the people and processes involved with creating those products. In particular, the roles and responsibilities within the accessibility team, testing, and early implementation during the content creation stage. We'll end with some key takeaways and also a Q&A session. So with no further ado, let's meet the speakers. As I mentioned, my name is Todd Markey Booten. I'm the Senior Director of Accessibility here at Strive. I wear a number of hats, but over the almost decade that I've worked in accessibility, I primarily focused on content creation. So authoring alternative text content, art design, and art correction. But I also provide training and consultation for clients, and I act as a liaison between clients and our various product specialist teams. I'm a certified professional in accessibility core competencies through the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, and I've provided workshops and seminars on alt text authoring around North America. When I'm not doing all that, I enjoy hiking and camping and traveling, which has been harder to do over the last year or so, but I think there's hope in sight. Let me introduce you, or introduce the second speaker, Sam Prue. Sam.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, absolutely. Incredibly excited to be here today to talk about this super important topic. I myself am a lifetime screen reader user. I've had a talking computer running some kind of screen reader that was hooked up to the internet for as long as I can remember, all the way from the early Apple IIs back in the day, all the way up to the latest Mac, from Windows 3.1 to Windows 10. So I've been experienced and experiencing the changes in this industry for quite some time now. I am the accessibility evangelist here at Fable. So I focus a lot on talking to companies about accessibility, talking about why it matters, talking about how it improves products, and talking about why getting assistive technology users involved in all processes of development contributes not only to better accessibility, but to better products in general. When I'm not talking about accessibility, I am talking, I'm moderating Reddit, or I'm reading ebooks and/or playing computer games. I make full use of my Kindle Unlimited subscription. I will certainly tell you that. But without further ado, why don't I turn it over to Jennifer here?
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Todd. So yeah, my name is Jennifer Chadwick. I'm the lead accessibility strategist at SiteImprove. SiteImprove is an automated testing platform, but we sort of partner with Fable. Just as an aside, Sam, we partner in order to have a holistic approach of automated scans and manual testing. I'm the trainer and consultant there. So my whole world is process, making sure that everyone on the whatever role you're playing at your organization, that you really understand and embed inclusive design in that mindset, and whatever role you're playing, you're doing your part. So helping with that strategy is what I've come to do. My background's in user experience design, so designing experiences. Of course, as soon as I really fully understood and had the ability to see how different people use the web, I got that larger perspective, and now you can't unsee. Everything must be inclusive for all right reasons. So yeah, what else I was going to say? The most important thing is all that, and then if and when I have time, it's film, it's music, it's usually BBC television shows, and cheese that I'm enjoying when I'm not doing everything else. So thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're so glad to have Sam and Jen with us. So let's get the conversation started. First, let's consider what is compliance and what is beyond it. So Jen, how would you define accessibility and usability and user experience?
Yeah, so in terms of a basic definition, so accessibility is that if we do call upon WCAG, or the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, they have the 4 principles: perceivable, operable, understandable, and kind of robust, where you're thinking of multiple users and adapting and creating your content and technical functionality to meet those needs. So accessibility means that regardless of ability or disability, all digital properties are accessible. They can be perceived and then operated upon. Usability is, well, accessibility is someone's user experience. So usability and accessibility are really closely related. But what we've sort of discovered is, accessibility, something could be accessible, but not particularly usable. And I'd love for Sam to sort of expand on that. But on the slide here, we have the third piece, which is, the user experience. Do people actually enjoy using it? It's not good enough just to say that they can access or perceive the content or experience and complete a task, but we all have the right to ease of use, something that's fully understandable and a joy to do. So just before, Sam, I'd love your thoughts. We have this sort of circle on the slide. We have a circle where user experience or UX is present, and then inside that, in a Venn diagram where they're touching, they're meeting and intersecting, is accessibility and usability. So before we talk about compliance, Sam, any thoughts to expand on what I said here for definitions?
I would absolutely love to sort of jump in on that with kind of an example that I think brings it home to a lot of folks. Too often when we think about accessibility, we just stop at, is it possible by hook or by crook in some way to access this? And if it is, we call it good. And the example that I often give is, in the corporate environment, there are some tasks that would take a sighted colleague 10 minutes, but because of the way the accessibility has been architected, take me 45 minutes. And that's really not a way for a person with a disability to keep a job, is it? And so that's one of many reasons why we have to get beyond this thinking, and we have to think about, okay, well, it has to be accessible, but it also has to be usable, and it has to be a great experience. It can't take someone with a disability 10 times longer to accomplish a task than someone without, because if it does, then we're not being fully included.
Exactly.
No, I agree. And I think that
Todd,
brings
yeah.
to mind too, Sam. I remember a project we were actually doing with Fable, where we ran into an issue where one of the testers was a power user, so someone who was very, very proficient with using a screen reader and was able to use sort of technical workarounds to get access to certain content within a product. But the fact is, everyone comes, assistive technology users have different degrees of expertise with the technologies they're using. So not everyone might have that same level of expertise. So it might be technically possible to access something, but how easy is it for people with a broader range of ability or experience using that technology?
Exactly. And if you're building a product that only makes it technically possible to access something because of workarounds, and you haven't put accessibility into your culture, into your processes, which we're going to talk about later, odds are you're going to make some upgrade that accidentally breaks those technical workarounds that you didn't even know people with disabilities were depending on. And now we're just out in the cold.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think that's really important to say. So,
yeah. We mentioned WCAG in relation to compliance, and I know that that's often one of the first topics that we discuss with clients when they're getting into implementing accessibility. There's a growing history of WCAG, and it's evolved over time. I don't know, Sam, what have you observed about how WCAG has sort of evolved and changed in response to how people are using it?
Yeah, I really wanted to take this little digression when we talk about WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines that are published by the W3C, and talk about the history of it and where it came out of, and the thinking behind it, and why that thinking is good and is useful, but is not necessarily enough. So let's talk about where WCAG came from. It was born out of the W3C's standardization web efforts to build sort of a cross-browser web. I'm sure all of you remember kind of in 1995, right? There was the browser wars. This website only works on Netscape Navigator with this screen resolution. And if you want to use Internet Explorer or Mac, you are certainly out of luck. And so the W3C was a cross-departmental effort, a cross-company effort to fix this and to build a standard web so that everyone could use whatever browser they wanted. And the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines were born out of that, to build accessibility standards so that some portions of accessibility could be standardized, so that it would work on all browsers, so that it would work across platforms and across assistive technologies. And that launched on May 5th, 1999. We've been talking about accessibility for a long time. We've been talking about accessibility since before Y2K. It just had 14 guidelines. It was really just a checklist. It was just a technical checklist to say, this is sort of the bare minimum. These are some things to check. These are some items to check off. And it wouldn't be until 2008 that we got version 2.0, which included those wonderful POUR principles that Jen mentioned a little while back, and really moved and expanded beyond just sort of a couple of different technical standards into a framework to build accessibility. And of course, now we've got 2.1. It launched in 2018, and it extended these guidelines to cover, mobile devices, to cover users with more different, types of assistive technology, with other different types of challenges, or with other different, types of abilities. And we're now working on a new set of WCAG guidelines that are going to expand even further. And so what this shows us is that the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines sort of started off as a checklist, but they quickly realized that you need to expand beyond those, and that you need to do more. And every release has expanded, has offered more guidelines, has offered more things to check, and has offered things that haven't been, something that you could just check with an automated tool. Automated tools don't cover all of those guidelines. And I think it's also super interesting that they're called the guidelines, not the commandments to achieve complete accessibility for everyone. Right. But I think we misunderstand that purpose a lot. And Jen, I can hear you wanting to jump in there.
No, I think you're absolutely right. No, yes, I think it's one of those things that as I moved into the accessibility space, and without just a very short, brief history as a user experience designer, starting to learn, understand. What I want to point out is not just the needs of people with disabilities to act, by way of their various ways that they use the web, but Sam, to your point, and Todd, to your point, preferences, the joy of it. So you start to learn WCAG, you start to get overwhelmed, and then you really do kind of scale back and read about each of the guidelines. It's precisely what it is. There's so much of a focus on compliance with these things, just to meet these things, and then not do more. They're living, breathing documents that are being, with all those needs and preferences being better understood and then considered as we move into 2.1, 2.2, 3.0, that kind of thing. So yeah.
Exactly. And, to this day, we just expanded it to cover mobile devices, but
Yes.
just because WCAG doesn't cover virtual reality, does that mean that accessibility shouldn't be thought about? Of course not. And eventually it's going to expand there. But companies should be getting ahead. If you have a product that maybe isn't covered by guidelines yet, you get the opportunity, the incredibly exciting opportunity, to innovate and to be part of that discussion, and to move compliance forward through your own efforts, not just to think about compliance and stop. Todd, I think I cut you off there.
No, that's great. I love being cut off in that way. No, I agree. One thing that clients often ask us as they're starting to consider WCAG 2.1 instead of WCAG 2.0 is how the two differ. How do the sort of recommendations or requirements change? And I think that reflects sort of a growing understanding of how people are using content, as well as how people might want or prefer to use content. So, the focus on increased sort of mobile accessibility, I think, is one change in WCAG 2.1 versus 2.0. I know one thing that we run into a lot is the image contrast requirement, which is something new for a lot of digital publishers, creating images when possible that meet contrast requirements. So I think that does, to me, point out the changing expectations and how those change with technology and change with understanding of what people want and need from their digital content.
And I think it's so important to think about those expectations as opportunities to innovate, not as shackles that bind us. I mean, look, when Twitter came out originally and it had that 120 character limit, right? Everybody innovated new ways to communicate. They didn't think of that as a binding thing, and they certainly didn't say, "Oh, 120, I'm not going to use Twitter." Right? Everybody innovated, and everybody made a new form of communication that is better for some folks. And we have the opportunity to do that here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one last thing to mention, just to both your points, is that Silver 3.0 has been changed, right? It's not WCAG anymore. It's going to be called the Accessibility Guidelines. They're dropping the web because we've evolved so much that we're considering mobile, XR, VR. So there's a real understanding, that it may be just the name, I may be fooled, but there's a lot of discussion going on, to your point, about an adoption of different technologies and a recognition of that in at least the basic guidelines to move beyond. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you were talking about, Todd, with publishing. I mean, ebooks aren't the web, but accessibility and reading is still incredibly critical to get an overview of a topic or to learn something. Right? It doesn't all come out of the web. I mean, books, they may have been digitized, but they're still books, and they are still so critically important.
Absolutely, and that I hear a lot of us talking about options and talking about how different people approach the web or websites or digital content differently. And to me, that's a lot of what going beyond compliance means. It means keeping in mind people's needs and preferences when we're designing any kind of digital product. And I remember, Sam, in a past conversation, you had brought up that it doesn't mean that we have to achieve compliance first and then move on to going beyond compliance. I think we can simultaneously be working toward making sure people can use a product and making sure that they can use it easily and enjoy using it.
Absolutely. And as we create some of those options, they will help us move towards compliance.
Absolutely. I think it's all tied into each other. And I think that's sometimes a misconception that people have, is it's in a sort of a zero-sum game. You're either doing one or the other. And I think it's all part of just good design. I'm increasingly aware of how, people's needs are based on both ability and circumstance. So, I might need to access content in a certain way based on an impairment I have, or I might need to just because I don't have the option of viewing it, say. I might need to listen to it for circumstantial reasons. And also preferences can vary widely for people who have similar needs. And I think that oftentimes there can be an assumption that if people, that everyone with certain needs has the same set of preferences. Someone in the audience brought up a question about alt text and decorative images. And I know that there's been a lot of conversation about what does it mean to provide sufficient alt text. She said, just to read her comment verbatim, one of the biggest misconceptions I see is the proper use of alt text. Many decorative images have useless alt text. Many informative images have either inadequate alt text or none at all. And I think that depends on the context that an image lives in. And I think it also depends on the audience. We've been increasingly talking about, what about users with low vision who know an image is present, but don't have the option of listening to a text equivalent for that image. On the other hand, someone who's not viewing the image at all might not want to hear alt text for every image on the page that's not serving an informative purpose. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, it does. The advice I always give people when we talk about this is that it's so important, and we're going to talk about this later, distributing accessibility throughout processes in a company, because it's so important for the person who decided to insert that image, for them to be creating the alt text, because they know the answer to the key question, which is, what am I trying to communicate with this image? And if the alt text doesn't communicate the same thing, then you're not doing a good job, and it's not adequate alt text. If it doesn't communicate either the same information or the same sort of emotional depth. I mean, I saw once, it very rarely happens, but I saw an advertisement with some alt text, and it said something like, the man is smiling, happy because he has this product, which I mean, okay, a bit on the nose, but it's communicating what that image is for and what it's trying to communicate. And that's what alt text is for. It's alternative text. And sometimes I wish we could put the word communication like in there to help people understand. And there are some images that are decorative that aren't communicating anything.
Yeah, just exactly. Maybe quickly, I'll say I had a call with a team, and we were discussing this, and someone piped up, why can't we just have a separate website for blind folks, because they don't need those images anyway. They would just have it all text and have them read that. And a friend of mine who was on the call just sort of said, well, that for many reasons that's not necessarily what we want. That's kind of the opposite of inclusive design. But he said, personally, I like having those things announced. I like those things described to me. It's not just the text I'm interested in. I really want to experience the whole thing.
Absolutely, and I think it's different users with different preferences. I'm not sure where we are on slides, but we've got a slide about that, about how these accessibility things become mainstream because user preference is so important. I mean, we were talking about ebooks a moment ago, and like the stratospheric rise in audiobooks. Audiobooks started out mainly produced by the Library of Congress in the United States for blind folks in the 1920s, and today they're for everyone, right?
Mm.
Audiobooks are marketed as a mainstream thing. And then as you create these things, audiobook narrators have to think about how are they going to describe pictures in a book? How are they going to make this text accessible? In the same way, the Globe and Mail created a feature that uses AI and these excellent neural network voices that we have today to read out articles. But in order to do that, they had to get their website in a shape where the AI could tell, okay, this is the article, this is the part that's important to read out, so that the AI isn't reading out advertisements and the navigation menu and all of that other stuff. And that work is also useful to screen readers because the landmarks have been placed there. And so whether we want the high quality neural net voices or want to read it out with our fast robotic voices that we use at 300 words per minute, the work is now done so that everyone knows what's article and what's not.
Right.
Options. I think that's what it is. And to go back to this idea of the growing appeal of accessibility features and how people are increasingly using them out of preference, that applies to text alternatives or alt text too. I think that's one thing that people have traditionally thought of, as you were saying, Jen, as something that's really just useful for people who aren't viewing the image. But I found, talking to a lot of higher ed students, that when figure descriptions are included in the main content of a digital textbook, for example, or the figures are described in more detail in the body text that accompany the figure, they find that useful because I don't know if anyone's ever taken an organic chemistry class, but some of the diagrams in those textbooks are mind-boggling, even for people who can view them on the page and don't have any trouble discerning the details. So I think there's a growing understanding that what we think of as alternative content adds value for a lot of people for a variety of reasons. And I think one sort of accessibility feature that's been getting increasing attention recently, or at least I've admittedly started to pay more attention to, is captions. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, Jen.
Yeah, and we will get to some really interesting stats on that in the next slide, but captions, so I'll borrow a phrase that the W3C spouts, which is, essential for some, useful for all. So captions may be essential to someone who can't hear. They need the captions track to read the speakers, but also when I write captions or I'm working on a text transcript as an alternative to that video, for some, you want to include the sounds and the anything that is on that audio track. So that's essential for that particular person, but it's useful for a lot of different people. So it's an example of an inclusive design that met that need, but also benefits others if even temporarily, such as if you're either in a crowded space and you want to watch a video and you can't hear that audio track, you can turn the captions on. Similarly, if you're in the library and want to read a video, watch a video, but there's absolute silence and you don't want to break that silence, you can throw the captions on. So it's, yeah, Sam, anything else
Absolutely.
to add there
I was
specifically?
going to say, I mean, around captions, it's one of those things that people originally thought of as like, oh, this is such a expensive thing to produce and it's only useful to a few people, and as soon as they started producing it, they found that's not true. We're starting to find the same thing with audio descriptions. I know sort of my family members, I always have it on when I'm watching TV, and now they're to the point where they miss it because they're like, I want to be able to look at my knitting, or I can't follow all these fast shows and keep track of everyone and everyone's names. I like the audio description. And a study was actually conducted by the WGBH in Boston, and they do a lot of kids programming with audio description. And they found that parents who turn on the audio description for their sighted children, those children have a massive increase in their ability to communicate verbally.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. Yeah. So
yeah, no, exactly. And I'll we'll get to the numbers in a second, but just to sort of echo what you two are saying, I can attest here that I basically just listen to books now, and most often I listen to them using VoiceOver on my phone in combination with Kindle, so I can mark them up at the same time. And also, I don't know if my wife and I would ever watch television in our house anymore after our kids go to bed if we didn't have the option of captions, because they're so they're very sensitive to noise. So to your point, and Jen will discuss some of these incredible stats. More and more people are using captions for more reasons than we might think.
It's true. So yeah, Todd, thank you for researching this. We want to share on this slide. We have, just a couple of stats. A survey of over 5,600 US adults showed that 80% are more likely to watch an entire video if it has captions. And I think I include myself in that adulthood. And then 69% watch videos with the sound off in public places. So that's a large number. That's a significant amount for the population that is leveraging that. 37% are more likely to turn on sound because captions piqued their interest. That's sort of if we're on Facebook or any other social media sites or LinkedIn or whatever, and you a video can start and you can have the captions present, and then if I might just watch the whole thing with the captions on or turn it on, sort of leading to wanting to hear the people's voices because I'm so engaged with the speaker as a visual user, just from my personal perspective. And then in another study, most students said they often use captions as a learning aid. And yeah, if either of you have any additional thoughts or feedback or experiences with that, anyone you've worked with. And then finally, 71% of students without hearing impairments use captions. So there we have a little pie chart used. Some are all the time and did not use, and it's 71% that will regularly use them.
No, absolutely. I think in terms of the sort of the academic context, the educational context, I think this also speaks toward universal UDL, universal design for learning, and providing students with more options for how they engage with content and how they engage in the learning experience. So one last thing that we wanted to mention in the interest of time, we have to keep things moving on here, or we will keep going and going. One other thing, and Sam spoke to this, the PowerPoint got away from me, is that one big benefit of doing accessibility work is in the process of understanding how we present content to people who we assume are going to view it or interact with it using a mouse. We also identify ways that we can improve it for everybody. So here, in terms of how we lay it out, how the content flows, how it's identified using headings, labels, and instructions. So many times working with different educational clients, we found that in the process of asking ourselves, well, how is the assistive technology user supposed to know what this content is about? We identify the fact that there really should be a heading there for everybody to benefit from. There needs to be sort of a clear, more consistent structure within the document or the product that will provide signposts for people to use as they're moving through it, whether they're viewing the content, whether they're using assistive technology, the content. An example of a sort of a consistent logical heading structure that many people will probably be aware of. Putting headings in the right place and having them contain meaningful text and displayed the same way each time helps people who are viewing the content as well as people who are listening to it. And there are other examples. There are many other examples included here as well. We'll identify, well, the way that color is used in this image not only isn't evident because it's not labeled, but it might be confusing to someone who's looking at this as well. So there are many other aspects to how we can improve the presentation, the visual design of a product by looking at how it will be interpreted or used or manipulated by someone who's using assistive technology. I don't know, Jen or Sam, if you had anything to add to this.
Sam, anything else to add? I think that was covered from my side.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, what I sort of briefly mentioned a while back with the Globe and Mail. The more structure you put to a piece of content, the more different things you can do with it. And on the next slide as well, we're starting to talk about improving accessibility also improves search engine optimization. But too often we think of search engine optimization as like a purely external thing, so an external visitor can use Google and can come and find the website. But one example that I think of a lot is many webcomics have started offering full transcriptions of the comic, which is a great accessibility feature and is often used that way. But it didn't start out that way. It started out because there were 7,000 releases every day of this comic, and somebody wanted to find a particular image. And without transcriptions, there's just no way you can even search your stuff internally. And I think a lot of big companies, whether it's publishers, whether it's ebook companies, whether it's other folks, are finding that as well, that when you make content accessible, it's now searchable and you can now find it. You can organize it because it's not stuck in an image. You can copy it to the clipboard and you can cite it and you can share it because it's not stuck in a video. You can now bring text of it out, or you can, even as a screen reader user, I'll open up the captions because I want to know how's that spelled exactly. And of course, sometimes they're AI captions and it's completely wrong, and I just go with that anyway. In an ideal world, all of these things are improving. When we improve accessibility of content, we improve the accessibility of content for everyone, for all things. I know we want to sort of move on to the people and process section, but I think it's interesting and really says something that there are so many benefits to accessibility that we're feeling rushed for time just to list them all, and there's some that we're not including.
Oh, absolutely. And I do want to, and before we move on to discussing people and process, I did want to say a couple things as I'm looking at the questions come in here. A lot of great questions. A lot of them have to do sort of with more nuts and bolts how-to topics, which we will definitely get to. We will answer all questions in this Q&A. Because we're sort of dealing on a little bit of a higher level during this relatively short time, we have to discuss these topics. We'll focus on that, but I did want to bring this up because we're talking about user experience and designing for user needs and preferences and how we define these different things, accessibility, usability, and user experience. Someone writes, we also use the term quote unquote enjoy in the definition of accessibility internally at my workplace. I often get stuck on this term enjoy. I might be using TurboTax to file my taxes, which is an experience I never enjoy. And there is also nothing enjoyable about laying off a direct report in Workday. The term enjoy seems inappropriate as part of the definition of accessibility.
May I just clarify? Because I think I sort of, and Sam, and Todd, let me know, but what I've heard and longstanding working with user experience design, which is a marketing aspect, you want to provide, a good experience of people who buy your product. There's that buzzword about customer delight. How do we delight them? How do we engage them in user experience? And all this time I was thinking, I imagine people with disabilities would love to be delighted by the experience, but what we haven't even, how can we incite customer delight in everyone when the basic needs of accessibility haven't even been considered for that particular design, or it's not been inclusive at that stage. It's Sam, maybe you've had some fantastic experiences with certain companies who have made that change. They've gone beyond compliance and really made it enjoyable for you to use.
Absolutely. And, I think delight and enjoy are very context-based, and I think that's okay. To speak directly to this question and this question, I don't know if you remember back in the day, pre-Google, Yahoo and Alta Vista, they all wanted to be web portals, and their goal was to keep you on their website for as long as they possibly could. And then Google released a search engine where you did a search and you got directly to what you were looking for, and you were using Google as little as possible. And people enjoyed it. And that's why Google was able to take over the world, because they realized, hey, for us, someone enjoying our product, someone who is delighted with our search, is using it as little as possible. And to this day, you know, I think all of us are delighted when we type in a search and we get exactly the result that we wanted, number one, and we don't have to spend any more time there and we don't have to keep looking. And so, you know, maybe it's for you, maybe TurboTax, maybe what people enjoy is being able to do their taxes without having any errors and without having to go back and without having to take extra time. And maybe that's what makes, you know, a tax company or a layoff company, maybe that's what makes you king, is by making the enjoyable experience, the unenjoyable experiences easy and quick.
Pain-free.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that might be the thing. So to me, that might be, if we think back to that Venn diagram, maybe sometimes user experience is the circle of user experience is more taken up by the twin circles of accessibility and usability. So maybe the usability is really what defines that user experience when, you know, you don't really want to do your taxes or you don't really want to, you know, report health information, but have the ease
you want to make
doing
it easy to use, to do it quickly and get out of it and stop doing it.
Exactly. And
meaningful.
So.
Exactly. And, you know, some companies like you know, say a Spotify or a Netflix, they're totally different, because when I go there, I want to have an experience. I don't want to get out of it in seconds, right? I'm here for an experience. And I think recognizing what the user wants and the user's intent is what's key to making things enjoyable and delightful.
Yeah, I appreciate
that
perspective.
You know, I love how this conversation is getting going, but we do need to keep mindful of time. So let's talk about, you know, we've given you a broad overview of sort of how accessibility and user experience overlaps, how people are increasingly turning toward accessibility features to improve their user experience for a variety of reasons. But how does this happen? How do we get this done? I think the most important way we do this is by focusing on the people and processes involved with actually creating the website or the digital product. I will say, before we go, I'd like to just sort of review our opening poll. Thank you so much for everybody who participated. Let me see here. I will read out the results based on question, just so we have this context as we move into the discussion of people and process. So, I'm sorry, this is an example of accessibility or user experience. I'm having a hard time reading the little print on my phone, so give me a moment. 114 people voted, so about a little over 50% response. In response to the first question, how many hours per week do you dedicate to accessibility? Most people, about half, let me see, 60% of people spend less than 10 or no time currently working dedicated to accessibility. Of the remaining people, most spend more than 20 hours a week. So it looks like most people here are just getting started working on accessibility, or they're just learning how to integrate that. What's your accessibility role? Most people, 40%, are direct workers, followed by project managers or other, and then administrators and consumers. So most people who responded to the poll are doing design, testing, or content development work in relation to accessibility. 63% of people said that they have used WCAG when creating or testing digital products. And 61% of people said that they have never worked with people with disabilities or people who use assistive technologies in their daily lives as part of their personal accessibility work. Finally, for question number 5, which was, what's the primary challenge you face in working on accessibility? Sorry, I got distracted by my phone technology. 56% of people said training was their biggest obstacle to working in accessibility, followed by other reasons such as available resources, then internal support, budget, and finally time. So it looks like we have an audience here who's just sort of starting to develop a sort of a more robust approach to how they do accessibility work. And on that note, we will move forward to discussing accessibility roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, and I think thanks for presenting that poll. And with some legitimate concerns, some key things. What I have here are some challenges that we've definitely heard before. So I'm just going to read out a few. So maybe these sound familiar. My team doesn't have a clear enough understanding of the subject matter for accessibility. My team doesn't even know where to begin with accessibility requirements and best practices. My team only considers accessibility towards the end of the process or life cycle. My team often deprioritizes accessibility due to poor planning or tight deadlines, which is entirely understandable. Accessibility doesn't get enough executive buy-in or leadership to be taken seriously. Support from them, from that C-suite. My team has no common understanding of what accessibility, quote unquote, actually even means. My team perceives accessibility to be too time-consuming, too expensive, and overly complex. And someone is yet to be made accountable for accessibility ownership in our life cycle. So these challenges, and again, feel free to share or message in the Q&A, because I'd love to hear from you if those things are striking a chord. But Todd, if we can move to the next slide, of what I wanted to show, and I'm really excited to share with you, a project that within the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, under which there's a department that publishes the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, the Sam was talking about. And then in there, there's the WAI, which is the Web Accessibility Initiative. So the W3C is a standards body for the internet, and then WAI is responsible for helping people understand WCAG, the guidelines themselves, but also producing free open source resources to help everyone get the job done. Once you learn about, you start with compliance to WCAG, and then of course you move way above and beyond that with an inclusive mindset. So there's a project within the W3C called the Accessibility Roles and Responsibilities Mapping Methodology, or the ARRM. And I'm so excited and proud to be part of this working group, because it's my world. And this is what I do, where we engage with teams that have these challenges. And so what I try, this slide is called Roles and Responsibilities Solutions. So just a note to say that accessibility is a team effort. If you are a developer, if you're a content author, you don't have to all of a sudden learn code overnight. That's the developer's role in this. You as a content author or contributor or writer, there's a certain skill set that you will be equipped with as a content expert. What you're doing is adding and leveraging your own skill set and adding to it, where you're now aware of accessibility and doing it whatever you can to meet those needs and preferences. So from adoption, where a company says, okay, we're going to do this accessibility thing. We're going to make sure it's non-negotiable. It's not going to be sort of de-scope from any project. We're going to adopt it. We're going to put training, time, energy, and budget towards making this happen. It'll take a while, but we're going to slowly overturn ourselves and make ourselves sort of leaders in inclusive design. To all of those, actually doing the work every day, and that little bit of extra that you do just naturally becomes your work and your life cycle, to ongoing maintenance, to making sure that now you're educated and thinking inclusively, not just of one user, but of up to five different user types. You are doing this every day, and you regularly stop those barriers from happening on your digital properties. So it can be low cost in the beginning and a team effort. And the ARM exercise is actually I found a cool framework to get started. It's totally open source from the W3C. It's a framework to find apathy. And it's, and moving to this next slide, it consists of some definitions of each of the roles. So you can go to it and look and see, that's me, I'm the content author. And sort of how accessibility would be part of, and usability would be part of your experience. And then we have two very practical things that we've created. One is a role-based decision tree. So it's actually a team exercise to sit down with your team, hopefully in person someday, but if not remotely, grab a coffee, and then look through an accessibility, we call them checkpoints, tasks, It could be an issue that someone's raised where images have no text alternative, for instance. Then you walk through this 7-step process, the decision tree, by process of elimination. Is this issue? How are we going to fix it? Is it related to just a high-level business or non-functional thing that says all images need to be accessible? No, it's much more specific than that. So we move on to number 2. Is this a content author? Does the content author need to be involved in this consideration? Well, we're missing a text alternative. I would say the content author is involved. Next, is it related to the visual design? We're happy with the image, the way it looks and feels. It's the content, the text alternative that's missing. So I wouldn't say the visual designer is involved. Does UX need to get involved? No, the layout of the page is fine. It's just the image that has no alt text. Does the front-end developer need to get involved? Then you say, okay, they may need to code that alt attribute or that ARIA label onto the image. So then you start to really figure out what roles are responsible or sort of need to be involved in a solution. Then next, you go to, is QA involved? Well, not until later. And then number 7 is my favorite, which is after all of this amazing kind of triage, you look at number 7 and say, is it somebody else? If no one's claimed or no one, we don't really know who's going to own this fix. Is it somebody else in your workflow? In which case, who? And you start to recognize gaps in your organization to say, nobody's owning alt text on images. No one's writing transcripts. So the other thing I have on this slide is the level of ownership. So once you decide who may be involved in fixing the accessibility issue, then like a RACI chart, RACI, if anyone's familiar with that, responsible, accountable, sort of consulted or informed, RACI is the acronym there. We have our own version, which is called, which is primary, secondary, and contributor. So we look at who's involved, and then we say, who is the primary owner? Who is going to get this done for us, quite practically? So maybe the content author that adds text to their content management system, or maybe the developer that puts their hand up and says, I need to code an alt attribute for you. And then content author, I'll ask you to add that description for me. So it's really down to brass tacks. Todd, if you just move to the next slide.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, Jen, I hate to interrupt. We're running short on time.
Yeah.
And gets to share too.
So I think I've presented everything. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I just would like to reassure people that, there are a lot of questions waiting to be answered. We will respond to all of your questions if we don't get to them during this particular webinar. So I'd like to move on, if possible, to manual and automated testing, Sam, to discuss some of that.
Absolutely. And that's really talking about testing to make sure that these processes that Jen's just been talking about are working, because these processes are so important and are so critical. And the thing that we know and we realize at Fable is if you don't have these processes in place, even if you do all the testing and find all the flaws, they're never going to get fixed, or they're not going to get fixed reliably. However, let's talk about testing and when you're testing. We talk a lot about automated testing for accessibility, and we talk a lot about manual testing for accessibility. And too often there's this idea that it's a binary, that you can automate all your testing, you can do it that way, or all of your testing should be manual. Automated testing is no good, don't do that. Do everything manually. And neither of those things are correct. Automated and manual testing need to work hand in hand in your complete accessibility process and in your complete accessibility measuring. Because manual testing is great at demonstrating the real experience that assistive technology users are having. And we've talked about that difference between, is something just accessible or is it actually a usable, great experience? The only way to find that out is through manual testing. Manual testing can also help you prioritize issues, because when you're working with users of assistive technology and you're finding, hey, this is a barrier, this is stopping someone from completing a task versus, oh, this is really annoying, but it's taking them a while, you can now prioritize those issues based on the impact that they're having on real, actual individuals. And of course, it can catch the 70% of errors that automated testing can't catch. Todd, yeah, you want to jump in there?
No, that makes sense.
Sorry, yeah, I thought I heard you.
I think that was me breathing.
Sorry, yeah. And whereas, so these are the things that manual testing can do for you. But automated testing has its own strengths. If you are a publisher and you have 30,000 ebooks, each with 200 pages that you want to test for accessibility errors, the place to start there is going to be automated testing. If you have a giant web portal with hundreds of thousands of pages, you're going to want to do the automated testing because it can help you catch those 30% of issues that are really huge barriers. It helps you test the missing alt text. It helps you test the missing form labels. It helps you test the, unlabeled controls, things like that. It also helps you retest everything regularly because, an automated test, you can run it as part of your CI workflow, as part of your integrated development workflow, and you can have it tested so that, hey, automated test flags one of the errors that it can catch here. We should probably not release, until this is at least fixed. And it can catch those basic errors that have got to be fixed, and automated testing will then make your manual testing more valuable because now your manual testers aren't wasting time telling you, hey, this image has no alt text and this image has no alt text and this control has no label and I don't know what this does. Instead, your manual testers can now be telling you about the experience because you've at least got to the minimum where they can probably understand what the website is for, and we can probably understand what it's supposed to do and how it's supposed to behave. And now we can tell you, hey, when I press the button labeled add to cart, I guess it's supposed to add stuff to my cart, but it doesn't tell me anything happened. And that's an experiential error that, that we can help you catch, but we can help you catch that because the automated testing has helped you get that button labeled. And now we know, oh, this is supposed to be adding to my cart. Is it? I don't know what's happening. Whereas if it just says to my screen reader button, hey, I pressed the button, labeled button, and nothing happened. Was anything supposed to happen? I don't know.
Sam, I'd like to move on in the last couple of minutes. Sorry that we're running out of time here to touch on a couple of things about early implementation as well. This PowerPoint will be available to everybody who has after the webinar, so you can benefit from the other thoughts that we weren't able to cover in the given time frame.
Absolutely.
I wanted to quickly touch on a couple things that we often run into in sort of the digital publishing world. And the first thing is bridging the editorial production divide. Jen sort of mentioned initially about the fact that oftentimes people are implementing accessibility late as a late stage add-on, or sometimes they have so much, excuse me for misclicking, they have so much existing content they need to remediate right away to make it accessible that that often happens during what we refer to as the production stage. So after the editorial team has signed off on the original content and it's gone on into formatting and tagging, and sometimes as a result of that, and the fact that some accessibility work tends to be on the technical side, there can be a view within publishers that accessibility is a production task. But the good news is that editorial and art teams can also start addressing accessibility and user experience during authoring and art design. And there's some real advantages to doing this. The first is that they maintain more control over the final product. If they're designing for accessibility and user experience from the beginning, then the product that they design, the content they originally create, will most closely match the content that ends up being released into the market. The next is that they can produce text and image content with broader appeal, as we sort of talked about, including figure descriptions in the body of the text is more useful to more people than we might have originally realized. And finally, it reduces overall effort and cost. I know a lot of people on attending this meeting might have run into situations where they've had to revisit a lot of content and change it at the last minute, which increases the cost of producing that content. And just as an example, there is, I've included a sample pie chart here in which the figure title is set separately as text. The labels are included on each of the sectors of the pie chart. The image contrast is high enough so that the different sectors can be seen or more likely to be discernible by someone with low vision. And there's alt text provided for this figure. All of these elements of accessible art design are possible during the editorial stage. And by doing that early on, you save additional labor and worrying about who's going to be in charge of that task, and potential schedule, risking schedules because you have to revisit content later on. We have 8 basic rules for implementing accessibility and user experience into authoring and art design. Define color palettes early, assume images with meaningful color need labels, use built-in tools. If you're authoring in Word, use the built-in tools for defining headings, columns, lists, and so on. Just don't manually change the way they visually appear on the page, because that won't add sort of semantic tagging to them, which can make them easier for assistive technology users to navigate. And there are other examples on this page, which out of consideration to time, we won't get to. I want to make sure that we leave you with a few key takeaways before hopefully we squeeze in a couple of questions from people before everybody starts to sign off. I know that people are starting to leave. So here are the 6 key takeaways. Jen, what are your 2 most important takeaways from this presentation?
So I think those are my top 2 there. Accessibility and user experience are outcomes of an inclusive mindset. So anytime you're designing, designing, or developing anything, or if you're the project manager, creating a project around a new product or service, stop and do a design session, but just think of at least a minimum of 5 people rather than just 1. And then it'll just be so much easier once you have that empathy and understanding to start designing and building and coding for people's needs. And then, yeah, accessibility is a team effort in that way. And everyone does their part, then you start to move the dial.
Excellent.
Absolutely. And on my end, it's about maturing the accessibility practice to involve both automated and manual testing. It's not a binary. It's both are incredibly great tools in the toolbox, and you should be using both to help you in picking the right tool for the job. And that manual testing should be done by actual assistive tech users, not the QA department, because we are the ones who understand the experience and who can talk about what the experience should be as opposed to what it is right now. I know I didn't get to cover that very much in this particular presentation for time considerations, but hey, this one has been so much fun. Perhaps there'll be some kind of sequel in the future, depending on how things work out. I'd love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, finally, I'd just like to say, start at the manuscript and art design stages. Start early. That makes the whole process easier. And don't just think about the tags. Think about what goes inside the tags. Obviously, properly tagging content is extremely important, but the content itself is equally important for people who are using that content with a variety of different technologies. And I think that's one way that we can sort of expand our accessibility work into also helping improve user experience for more people. We've gotten so many questions and we have so little time. I think you're right, Sam. We could have expanded this into a series. Hopefully we'll have another opportunity. Let me see if I can fit just a couple of questions in. If Sam and Jen, you still have a bit of time.
Absolutely.
For those who are remaining, we still have about 140 people left on the call, so hopefully we can sneak some questions in. Let me see here.
I think you can export this list if we could. Would you both be up for writing some responses after taking some time to do it? Sharing that back?
Absolutely.
I'd love to investigate, deep dive into each of these amazing thoughts.
Yes, instead of rushing, I think that would be the best thing to do, so that we make sure that we do due diligence on people's questions. Yeah, a lot of these questions would take a little more time than we have left to respond now that I'm looking at it. So I think just to respect everybody's time and to ensure that we give adequately detailed answers, the most effective thing for us to do at this point will be to wrap up. And we will respond to every single one of these questions in detail via email, so that everyone gets answers to their queries. And so hopefully this is the start of a longer dialogue between everyone who attended and me and Jen and Sam. and their respective companies. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. If you have questions beyond what you've shared in the Q&A, please feel free to share them with us as well, and we'll respond. And I hope we have an opportunity to get together again and have future discussions.
Absolutely.
Sam and Jen.
Thank you.
This
Thank
has
you,
been great.
everyone. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.